Hey everyone, I'm Robin LaCroix. I'm a dietitian and teaching kitchen educator. And today I'm here to talk about and show you how to store, prepare, and meal plan for your CSA share. So a CSA share is a community supported agriculture share. And it is usually a subscription where you will receive a bag or a box of fresh produce from a local farm once a week throughout the growing season. It's a great way to support local farmers and to get delicious fresh produce. And so I want to talk about how to kind of effectively prepare each week so that you can use your items throughout the week in a way that reduces stress and allows you to enjoy all these delicious vegetables. If you've done a CSA share before, you may have had the experience where life gets busy, you bring home your share, you kind of shove it all in the fridge. All of a sudden the week goes by and you're getting ready to pick up your next one, and your last one is kind of like wilting in the fridge. And it can get overwhelming, and then you're having food waste. So let's avoid that by doing some planning ahead of time. This share came from the Vermont Youth Conservation Corporation's healthcare share program. But this is also transferable to probably most CSA share programs, just depending on the season. And as I talk about certain items, you'll be able to apply those to similar items as well. So let's get started. Okay, so the first item I'm going to talk about is zucchini and summer squash. And that's because this requires very little prep. I find that washing and chopping squash ahead of time, you can do it within maybe a 24-hour period, right? If you have time in the morning and you know dinner's going to be busy, chop it up and get it ready to throw in the pan. But otherwise, I don't think I would do it 3 or 4 days ahead of time. I just find because of the water content, it kind of dries out a little bit and the flavor gets a little bit off. So what I would do is just have a bag ready. And so you can use a generic plastic bag. These are produce bags, which are supposed to keep produce fresh a little bit longer. And so I'm going to bring the paper towels over because I tend to use them a lot in prep. I like to put a paper towel in the bag to help absorb any moisture. And then I'm just going to give these a wash. You don't have to, but I liked the idea that things are going in the fridge nice and clean. And so that when I take them out, they're kind of ready to use. So just give them a little scrub. All right, and then dry them off. Again, you could use a nice dry kitchen towel if you don't want to use too many paper towels. And so these are going to be ready to just chop up for the week. Again, most of us know zucchini and yellow squash are pretty easy to prep when you're cooking. They don't require a ton of, washing or drying, or pretty simple to chop. So these are going to be pretty easy to use as we go throughout the week. Now what I'm going to do is take out my notebook that I have right here and write down how I want to use these, because I have a lot of produce here and I haven't planned my meals yet for the next week. So as I start this process, I can get some ideas. I love zucchini and yellow squash just sauteed as a simple side dish, right? Many of us have had it that way. It's so delicious. It feels like summer. So that's one way that I'm going to use it. I did get, I have 5 here. And so probably 3 in a saute side dish is going to be plenty for our family size. So I might also make some zucchini bread or zucchini muffins if it's not too hot in your in your household at this time of year. You could also put it into a pasta dish. You could, put it into a soup or a regular stir fry rather than just have it plain. So kind of thinking about what other ways that you might enjoy this and then jotting those down on your notebook will be helpful. These will last easily all week in the fridge. But again, our goal is if you're getting a share each week, you kind of want to finish out what you've gotten the week before so things aren't building up too much. Okay, so next item, let's move to scallions. So I got this delicious bunch of scallions here. They smell really nice. Now, I was doing a little extra research on scallions because it's not something that I use super often. And there's definitely going to be different ways that you can store these items. You could just store these in a plastic bag with a paper towel and they will last the week. I was also reading that If you trim off these roots to about 1/2 inch, and then peel off that kind of outer layer, which you'll see a little bit of dirt on there. You can keep these fresh in a jar of cold water on your counter, which seems like kind of a neat idea. I haven't done this yet, and so it's something that I'm going to do and just see how it works. But from what I was learning, it sounds like it's a really effective way. And then as you want to use the greens, you just trim them off, either with scissors or take them out and trim them off with a knife. And if you like the smell of those scallions, they will offer that nice aroma. So either in a bag with a paper towel. The alternative is if you know that dinner time is quite busy for you, and the idea of like getting the scallions out and washing them and dicing them feels like it could be a barrier, then you could just wash them and dice them all right now and put them in a container with a lid or a plastic bag, and then they're ready to go. And so those would last throughout the week. They won't turn very quickly. I've definitely done that in the past because oftentimes for me, if something is in the fridge and requires washing and chopping, especially for a small amount in a recipe, sometimes I'll just skip it and kind of keep going if I'm in a rush. The other thing I forgot to put out here is my compost bowl. Another great one to have out when you're prepping your CSA. So yeah, I am excited about this scallion testing and see how this works. So jar, plastic bag with a paper towel, or wash them and dice them all up and just put them in a sealed container, and then they'll be ready to use throughout the week. And anywhere where you like that onion flavor, scallions are going to work great. The greens might be more of a garnish or more in a salad, but you can chop those whites up and put them in a cooked dish as well. All right, I guess we'll stay on these kind of flavory, herby items. So I got a head of dill. Now, dill is quite tender. If you are going to use it fairly soon, you can, again, just keep it in a plastic bag. With fresh herbs, it's recommended to wash them right when you're about to use them. So don't wash them ahead of time or they can wilt even more. You can also freeze dill. And so this is quite a lot of dill. You know, dill is an item that we often use maybe in smaller amounts, unless it's pickling season and you're making pickles or dilly beans. But I know that for me, I'm probably not going to use this much within the week. So I'm going to put my dill actually in the freezer, and fresh herbs do freeze really well. And so for the freezer, they do recommend washing it ahead of time. So just give it a rinse. And then you do want to get a good amount of that moisture out of there. So pat it dry. And I'm going to get a small plastic bag. I really like dill in potato salads. Kind of a common one. Salmon dishes can be really nice. And so anywhere you would be using it can work pretty well with a frozen dill. With the bag here, it gets a little messy. Once I have it sealed, I'll want to, let me wash my hands first so I don't get dill everywhere. Flatten it out so it doesn't just freeze in one big bunch. So do your best to kind of flatten it out and then put it in the freezer flat. And then that's way when you want some, you can just go in and kind of grab a bunch and throw it in a fresh potato salad or whatever you like it in. Okay, quick rinse. It's starting to smell delicious. Compost bowl. All right, another easy one. And one that smells so good is fresh basil, something so many of us love. A nice, quick and easy tip for fresh basil is to put it in a jar of water and keep it on the counter. And it should last you the week. Ooh, a little too much water. And then you get this lovely aroma as you're going through the week and enjoying this. So uses for fresh basil. I mean, basil, tomato, and mozzarella, that kind of caprese flavor is really popular and delicious. So any way that you can use that in a salad or a sandwich, it's going to be great on pizza, great on really any Italian food. I diced them up and put it in a stir fry recently, and that was really delicious. Maybe in a pasta salad, really on a sandwich, diced up in your regular green salads. All will be delicious. And if it's out on the counter, it's giving you that visual reminder to use it up. I'm getting this like beautiful array over here of things that are all ready. All right, next I have parsley, a big bunch of parsley. So I've heard different things on the ways to store parsley. I have heard putting it in a jar with water, like basil, can work really well. And I've also heard that covering it after you put it in the jar with a plastic bag can help. I tried that last year, and for me, it didn't seem to work out so well. It seemed to kind of turn fairly quickly. And I've had really good luck just putting parsley in a plastic bag with a paper towel and keeping it in the fridge. And so that's the method that I'm going to use. Again, with a fresh herb, we're not going to wash this one ahead of time. We will wash it as we use it. Parsley's another one. And this is a lot of parsley. If you don't feel like you're going to use your parsley throughout 1 week, because you might get more next week, you could chop it up just like we did the dill. So wash it, dry it, chop it up, and put it in a bag for freezing. And then anytime you're making, especially kind of an Italian dish or a dish that you like parsley in, soups, you can just take some out of the freezer and put it right in. That's going to work really well. But I'm going to keep mine fresh for now. I've had parsley last a couple of weeks in the fridge in a bag like that, and it's not a problem. All right, so coming back over to my list, so I'm not forgetting what I have here. So my scallions. And again, these being out is going to help me remember, because that oniony flavor you can add to a lot of things. So stir fries, soups, salads. All right. The herbs are one I think as you're thinking about what you're going to make throughout the week and doing some meal planning, I think naturally you're going to think, oh yeah, we like spaghetti. Yes, I could use my basil and my parsley in there. Or we're going to have a barbecue and I'm going to make potato salad. I can use some of the dill in there. So you might kind of think as you go. Maybe you don't come up with the exact thing at the beginning, but you're thinking throughout the week, how can I add some of these fresh herbs in? Okay. Next item is garlic scapes. So this might be one, if you've never done a CSA before, that you're a little less familiar with, because it's not something that we would often buy at the store. But these come off kind of the top of garlic as garlic is growing, and they have a really garlicky flavor and aroma to them. They are a bit milder than a clove of garlic. So when you're thinking about substitutions, if you really like garlic, you might put a little bit extra in this. But anywhere you would add garlic to a dish, you can add these diced up, and they're going to work really well. They're fairly tender. I almost think of the texture of them a little bit like a green bean. So when it's cooked, it's tender like that. So what I like to do, because again, if I put this whole wheel of garlic scapes in my fridge, likely I'm going to be less inclined to kind of go get them and do the chopping when I'm actually cooking. But if I dice all these up and have them ready to go, I'm much more inclined to take out my container and just take a scoop and throw them in a dish when I want that garlicky flavor. So I like to do some chopping ahead of time. You'll notice because these come in a big curve, they can be a little hard to work with. So I like to break them up into kind of 3 different sections and then just mince them up fairly small, or a small dice. I'm already smelling that garlic. These also freeze well. If you wanted to make a pesto with all that basil, maybe some of the parsley that you have, garlic scapes in pesto can be really delicious. So although it might take you 30 minutes to an hour to kind of get all of your items prepped in this way, the amount of time you're saving yourself later on is really worth it, because it would take a lot longer to take all these things out individually. as you're cooking and kind of prep them at that time. So you're using time now to save time later. All right, we're getting there. This one is still pretty curvy. You don't have to go all the way to the top. You'll notice right at the top they get a little thinner. So kind of use the meatier pieces of them, and then as you get to the top, you can just toss those. So you can eat these raw if you really like the flavor of garlic. Feel free to use them as a garnish. I actually have a little bit of a hard time tolerating a lot of garlic, but garlic scapes kind of in moderation I seem to do okay with. Okay, so now I've got these all kind of diced up. They'll just go in the fridge to be used this week. If I think I'm going to need longer than a week, I might put them in the freezer if I notice they're kind of wilting a little bit. Okay, now we're on to some of our greens. Let's do kale. So kale is a common one in a CSA share. It is really hardy. It holds up pretty well. So if you need to think about when throughout the week you're going to use things, you can wait on the kale a little bit if you need to use something like your lettuce earlier on. So with kale, a couple things you can do. One, again, prepping ahead of time is going to help. I think I'm going to say that with everything. But washing, drying, and taking the stems off this and just getting it in bite-sized pieces makes it ready to just grab and go. Some of that will depend on what you're going to do with it. So I love to make kale chips, and that's often what we do with our kale. And so I can wash mine, dry it, and just break it up into those pieces. And then they're ready to make the kale chips. Go into my normal spot for paper towels. Now to wash and dry kale, you could use your salad spinner. If you have a lot of it especially, that can work really well, but it also works pretty well just like this with a paper towel. Okay. I think I can fit it in here. Actually, I'm going to save that for the Swiss chard. I'll use a bag on this one. If you wanted to put kale in a soup, I would wash it, dry it, and kind of slice it up so that it is ready to just be tossed in. So I know for kale chips, I want kind of bite-sized pieces. And so I am just tearing pieces off of these stems here. They come off fairly easily. Other things that you can do with kale. So my favorite things are definitely kale chips, and I can link a recipe that I have to that. Dicing them up and putting them in soups. The great thing about kale in a soup is that it holds its texture. And so sometimes something like spinach in soup kind of dissolves a little bit or disintegrates, where kale really holds a nice hardiness, but also gets tender enough that it's not too chewy. Oftentimes people's complaint with kale is that you feel like you're chewing forever to get through it. And if you're eating it raw, you might be. The other nice thing to do with kale is massaging it and having a massaged kale salad. And it's really what it sounds like, is that you take pieces of kale this size and put a little bit of maybe a shake of salt, little olive oil, maybe even a little lemon juice, and just literally massage it with your hands for about 3 minutes. And it really tenderizes the kale. And then you could add like a dried fruit or apple. Blueberries can be nice, and maybe a nut and a cheese and a little dressing. So easy to find a recipe for that as well, but that can be a nice option for kale. Okay. The kale chips are really simple. And again, I'll link that recipe. So here's my kale. I am going to stick a paper towel in. Just any moisture that's on there, that will kind of soak that up. And so now when it's dinner time and I want to make kale, it's done and it's ready. I can just put it right on the baking sheet. Okay, compost. All right, we're getting there. 2 things to go. So this is rainbow Swiss chard. It's again a delicious one. Swiss chard will be something you probably want to use within your first few days of your CSA share. Sometimes Swiss chard can be a little bit dirty when you get it, especially on the stems here. This does look quite clean, but I'm going to give it a rinse. The most common way that people use Swiss chard, I would say, is just to saute it in a frying pan. And when we do that, we tend to saute the leaves and the stems a little bit differently, just because the stems can take a little bit longer to cook. And so when I prep Swiss chard, I like to prep the leaves and the stems kind of separately, or at least store them a little bit separately so that they're ready to throw in the pan easily. Okay, so the first thing I'll do is chop up the stems. Again, here on the bottom, just chop off any edges that we won't be using. I love the different colors here. Really take time to notice the visual kind of appeal of all these delicious veggies that you're using. Notice the colors and the textures and the aromas. It really helps with mindfulness to bring ourselves into the moment when we pay attention to these things. All right. So I'm not going to use a separate dish. I'm just going to put kind of one on the top and one on the bottom. And that'll help enough that if I want to cook them separately, I have that option. Okay, so our stems are in the dish. And then we've got these beautiful leaves. And so I don't know that there's a perfect way to cut these. I tend to kind of chop them in pieces here so that they're a little more manageable with my knife. And again, think about how you're going to use this. If you are just going to saute it or put it in a soup, kind of bite-sized pieces are going to be best. If you're going to use these leaves in a way that maybe you're wrapping them in something, then you'll want to prep them a little differently. Maybe you just wash and dry them and put them in a bag with a paper towel so that they're ready to go. Especially something that is fairly new to you. So if Swiss chard is not something that you cook with all the time, and it might feel a little bit intimidating, it's even more important to do the prep. Because to get motivated to try a new recipe or to cook it in a new way, if it is in your fridge and it's, still needing to be washed and prepped, the likelihood of you taking that step is probably a little bit lower. Versus right now, once I have it all prepped up, the likelihood of just moving forward and throwing it in a pan with some olive oil and salt and pepper is going to be a little more likely. Setting myself up for success. The other thing to think about with your CSA share is if you have more volume of something, or you have an item that no one in your household is going to eat or able to eat, think about how you can share that item with people in your community or your neighbors or family and friends so that it doesn't go to waste. People love when someone reaches out and said, hey, I have a head of this, I have extra of this, would you like some? I think it's a great way to share the share. All right, so I've got my Swiss chard all prepped here. I am going to add a paper towel, again, to help with any of that moisture and put a cover on this. And then this is in the fridge ready to go when I'm going to use it. So I'm going to add to my list here, Swiss chard, side dish, saute. It would be really yummy to put some of those garlic scapes in with the Swiss chard to add a little extra flavor there when you do that. All right, we're down to our last item, which is lettuce. So I have these beautiful heads of butter lettuce. These are going to make such delicious salads. Other things you could do, some people do lettuce wraps, and this butter lettuce can work really well for that. So maybe you make kind of like an Asian flavored ground meat saute, and you put it in that lettuce wrap and kind of like eat it like a taco or a wrap almost. That could be kind of fun. But really, these fresh salads or adding this lettuce to a sandwich or a wrap is going to be delicious. Now, this lettuce specifically is very delicate. And so it's not going to hold up a super long time. Couple of options. You could avoid washing it and just put it in a plastic bag with a paper towel and then plan to use it in a couple of days. I do find I like to wash this and dry it ahead of time, and I'm gonna do that with my salad spinner so I can show you that option. And I do find as long as you dry it well and put it in the bag with the paper towel, it really holds up fine. It holds up kind of similar amount of time. And then it's ready so that when it's salad time or I want a quick lunch, the lettuce is just ready to go. And again, increasing our likelihood of using it. So this is my salad spinner. You've probably seen items like this before. So I use this with a lot of greens. So if you're getting other greens in your share, maybe a type of chard or different types of lettuce, having a salad spinner is a really great tool. It's going to help make sure things are nice and clean and dried. Just helps you manage. So you're going to put all your lettuce or greens in your salad spinner, and then we're going to fill the whole thing with water. I've heard that putting a dash of salt in can help kind of bring the dirt down to the bottom. I don't know if that's research-based or not. Feel free to try it if you want to. If your greens are quite dirty, you might need to repeat this process twice. All right, so I'm full of water here. You probably don't need to move back and forth. Feel free to stay by your sink, but just give your greens a little wash here. And again, if you have a lot of grit on your greens, I would pick this part up, dump your water, then refill it with water again and repeat that process until your water's coming out pretty much clean. There wasn't a whole lot of grit on my lettuce here. So I'm going to come back over here. My greens up, dump my water. And then I do like to give the greens another rinse here. Kind of tossing them around. Just helps get any dirt off there. If you're in a really dry place where it feels hard to watch water just get tossed down the sink, feel free to water your plants with that extra water. Okay, so then shake off some of that moisture, but here's where the salad spinner becomes so valuable. Top on. And then mine has a little spout on the side where you can just dump that excess water. And look how much water comes out. So I usually do that twice. This is a great activity to get your kids involved in the kitchen. They think it's really fun. I usually just put it on the floor and get them kind of spinning around there. All right. So I'll get one of my produce bags again. So paper towel in there, and then just kind of inspect your leaves to make sure if there's any brown spots, feel free to pull those off. And you can really kind of pack a decent amount in here. Feel free if you have a lot and it still seems like there's some moisture to add a second paper towel, or to even change out the paper towel as the week goes on. Maybe a couple days in, if you notice it's quite damp, feel free to put a dry one in there. All right, so now the lettuce is good to go, right? It was worth taking that time because if I have this in the fridge that needs to be washed and dried, or this that I can just toss in a bowl, I'm much more likely to grab this and go and kind of make that meal that's gonna feel good and help my body feel good because the prep is already done. All right, so add down to my list here, greens for salads, sandwiches. Okay, and so as I move into the week and do a little more meal planning of what else I'm going to add, I have these general ideas down here for the veggies that I have and things that I can add to those meals. All right, I think I covered most of it. So I've got a lot of great items here. I'm going to move my fridge items to the fridge think about, especially if meal planning and using these items is new for you, think about where you're putting things in your fridge. Sometimes if they go in a produce drawer toward the back, you might forget about them, right? It's a new item for you. This is a new process to get used to. So maybe you keep things a little more visual and to the front so that when you are opening your fridge, you're seeing them and it's the reminder to use them regularly. All right, I hope this was helpful. If you're getting items that you're not quite sure how to store or what to do with, please feel free to add those to the comments and I'll try to give you some ideas.